Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the second installment of our new Geomagic Design X product spotlight series. This webinar is focused on the legacy boundary fit functionality in Geomagic Design X. I appreciate you joining us today, and I hope you'll be able to join us on future product spotlight webinars as well. A few housekeeping items before we get started. As you may have noticed, all attendees' lines were muted upon joining the webinar. Therefore, please use the Q&A button on your screen to submit any questions as we go along. In an effort to abide by our 20-minute time allotment, we may not have time to address questions live during the webinar. If that is the case, we will follow up with you after the webinar with an answer to your question. Additionally, we will make the answers to all frequently asked questions available for all of you who have attended. Finally, in a couple of days, you'll be receiving a follow-up email with a link to view the recording of this webinar, as well as a copy of the file that is used for today's demonstration. Once again, thank you for joining us today. I will now pass it on to Raphael Hasboon, a Geomagic application engineer, as he will be leading today's demonstration. Raphael, it's all yours.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. I will be going over a demonstration of the legacy boundary fit tool in Design X. And what that does basically is allow you to fit very accurate and precise surfaces to a mesh. So there on the left, you'll see a picture of just a plain mesh. In the center are some curves that we've been able to place on our mesh, and then using those curves, we fit surfaces using the curves as a boundary. And some really great applications for this tool are in the anything to do with the aerospace industry and automotive industry, things that have organic and free-form shapes, such as turbine blades, propeller blades, auto body parts, and benders, and things of that nature. The workflow I use the boundary fit tool with is using mesh data, and whether that's bringing in points before and basically creating mesh from your points. Once you have a mesh, you're able to create curves on the mesh using the tools in Design X, and then once you've created the curves, you use those as the boundaries to fit surfaces to. And then once you've created those surfaces, we want to verify that they're accurate and representative of what we want to model. And then finally, we export those surfaces into other packages to do what we intend. So without further ado, we'll jump straight into Design X. And I've already imported a mesh here. So this is a rear or back seat support. Let me turn off these reference planes so it looks cleaner there. So if you can imagine, there's a headrest that will go here, and then your shoulders rest up against these two shoulder pads you see here. Just to give you some context of what we're looking at here. So to start off, we want to create curves on our mesh. So we're going to jump into our 3D Sketch tab up top here and jump into the 3D Mesh Sketch mode. So that lets us access all these tools here. And one of the most important tools that I've come across is Extract Contour Curves. So this makes it really easy to tell the software what you're looking for and extract curves on our mesh without us having to manually place them. And right off the bat, you have two sliders that you can adjust to try to capture some curves in here. So first is the curvature sensitivity, and to demonstrate what this does, I'll turn this all the way up to 100, the maximum setting. And this is basically telling the software how sensitive you want to focus on all these individual creases you'll see in our mesh here. So if I preview that, you'll notice the software is going to try to look at each individual crease and fit a curve to that. So although this might look pretty cool from a practical standpoint, it's not going to give us a very good surface. But just as a demonstration point, you see what that tool does. If I turn that down to 60, which is pretty optimal for this mesh, we'll get much better results. Now this second slider is the separator sensitivity. So if you notice around each curve, there was a red highlight, and that'll be more obvious in a second. If I bump that slider all the way up to 100, the maximum setting, hit the next stage button, you'll notice we have a really big selection around these curves that are getting fit to the mesh. So what the software is doing here is trying to fit curves to an average of these selection modes. So again, hopefully that's clear in what that slider does. If I turn that down to 60, which is again optimal for this mesh, and preview that, give that a second, you'll see we're getting some great curves here on our mesh. Now this isn't this might not find all the curves you're looking for. So what's really great about this step is you still have access to all your selection tools up top. And for now, I'm going to be using the brush tool to add in a curve. And all I'm going to do is click and drag this across my mesh. And if I hit this magnifying glass, it'll let me preview my results. So what you'll see is a curves being fit to our mesh, both extracted with the Extract Contour Curves tool, as well as using our highlighted selection tools to add in curves. So once you're happy with that, we can hit the check mark. At this point, we can refine our curves. For example, you want to try to make them as rectangular as possible and as grid-like as possible. So we can click and drag on some nodes here to help fine-tune our curves before we jump into that boundary fit tool. Another option you have at this point is, if you notice, at each point, hopefully this is coming through clear, there's a bunch of nodes on our curves, which is kind of overkill for our application. So we can highlight all these curves and control how many nodes will be available to us. So up here in the top right, in the rebuild option, for example, if I type 10 and hit OK, now each individual curve only has around 10 nodes, which makes it a little easier to grab and maneuver and straighten curves out and smooth things out as well. One of the newest features we've added in the latest version of Design X is called Relax Contour. So it's a tool where you can highlight a curve and it'll automatically adjust the amount of nodes it'll give you, making it easier to control the curves as well. So that's an option you can play with. Cool. So now that we have some curves that we've drawn on our mesh, we can jump into the boundary fit tool. So I'll exit out of the 3D mesh sketch mode, and under menu, add-ins, that's where we have our legacy boundary fit tool. So I'm going to open that up. Curly wants to try to fit a surface to each individual patch here, but we're just going to focus on the center patch here. So I cleared all my current curve loops by hitting that little star button there. And then I'm just going to focus on this center panel for this particular exercise. So now that we've highlighted the region we want, we're going to hit the arrow for the next stage. And then we have a few more parameters we have control over. So the biggest influencer on this is how well your surface is going to fit. It has to do with this smoothness slider. So if I turn that down to the minimum, the software is going to try to fit a very exact and precise surface to your mesh. So since this is a seat, what you'll notice is there's some ripples in just a byproduct from the manufacturing process. So if I go ahead and preview that surface, now it may not be clear right off the bat, but this surface has a few ripples in here. And we have some tools that will let you basically see how smooth of a surface you have. So up top center, we have our deviation from body tool. So when I have my slider all the way to the bottom, you'll notice there's quite a bit of green in here, letting you know that your surface is fitting very accurately to your mesh. If I go back and turn the smoothness slider all the way up, instead of trying to fit an exact perfect mesh to or surface to our mesh, it's going to try to smooth out those ridges and creases that it sees. So if I preview that, you'll notice we have a lot less green in our deviation from body tool, but this is indeed a smoother surface. And we have other tools that will help you verify the smoothness. If you apply environment mapping by clicking on the little triangle next to our deviation from body tool, we can apply lighting conditions to our surface. So this is a zebra pattern lighting, if you will. And then on the right, under our accuracy analyzer tool, we can change our lighting mode. One of the ones I found to be very interesting was the cube type with a tunnel texture. So this effectively puts your surface inside a tunnel. And what you can see here is an arc showing on our surface in the smoother areas that's showing you the light at the end of the tunnel. So you can use that to drag around your part and also see those zebra stripes in there to see any ripples or verify the smoothness of your part visually. If I go back and, again, move our slider down to the minimum, again, representing our mesh very accurately, and then hit that magnifying glass to preview our surface, you'll notice right off the bat that the zebra edges are a lot more jagged and things aren't necessarily as smooth. Cool. So once you have a surface that you're content with, we'll go ahead and hit the accept. So now you see we've created a CAD surface. If I turn off our mesh, this is a CAD surface that you can export. So the way we created that surface again was through the 3D mesh sketch mode and extracting curves. This time I'm going to show you a little more manual method of creating the curves on our mesh, just in case the software doesn't extract the curves that you're looking for, or even using those selection tools sometimes doesn't give you the results you're looking for. So we can just come in here and click on spline in our 3D mesh sketch mode, and this is going to create, if you notice in our feature tree here, second 3D sketch. And at this point, I'm just going to click on my mesh, and it's going to create a spline along the mesh and fitting to your mesh when I click on the mesh. You'll see it'll automatically snap and create a solid spline once you hit a corner. And when you're creating these manual curves on your mesh, you want to try to keep things rectangular and square, and you want to definitely avoid any kind of sharp edges. That will assure that you create an accurate and tight-fitting surface to your mesh. So again, these were manually just created by me clicking on the mesh, and at this point we can also fine-tune the fit and shape of our curves. Cool. So once we're happy with the 3D sketch, we can hit OK to exit out of that spline command and exit out of our 3D mesh sketch mode. So this time we're going to jump back into our boundary fit tool, again under menu, add-ins, legacy boundary fit. So it'll show you it's highlighting this in green. That's the section we just created a curve on. Let's go to the next step, and we'll go ahead and adjust our slider. Cool. Give it a preview. And again, we can use these environment mapping tools to verify the smoothness visually of our surface. And then we can also use our deviation from body tool. You see we're getting a lot of green on this surface, so it's coming in very accurately. Let's hit the check mark. Cool. So one of the goals for this particular scan data was to create these surfaces to then allow us to create an upholstery cut pattern. And again, you have the option of the accuracy of your surface to smooth out some of these ripples that, again, are byproducts of the manufacturing process and things that you don't necessarily want to model. So we can turn off our mesh, and these surfaces at this point can be extracted into your CAD package, where you can then flatten them out and create things such as upholstery cut patterns. I hope you guys enjoyed this demonstration. I'll be able to pass it back to Adam in a second. If you guys have any questions here, feel free to reach out to Geomagic Sales Americas at 3dsystems.com, and you can also download trial and technical support at gettingstarted.geomagic.com. Thank you guys for joining us today, and I'll pass it back to Adam.
Thank you, Raphael. This brings us to the end of our Geomagic Product Spotlight webinar on Legacy Boundary Fit in Geomagic Design X. Please be on the lookout for invitations to future Design X product spotlights from 3D Systems. In the coming days, each of you will receive an email with the link to the recorded version of this webinar, some useful links regarding Design X, as well as answers to frequently asked questions. If you asked a specific question during the webinar, we'll be sure to follow up with you with an answer to your question in a timely manner. Thank you again for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.